speak about Rav Chaim.
I was like, I didn't do anything.
So let's kind of do a recap. Let's do a recap since we were all together. So we were together, Tinus Esther on Zoom, some of us. And then we went into Purim. Purim, of course, is always a highlight of the year. I hope everybody enjoyed themselves. To all of you who came to Pomona, to my house for Purim. We had a great time. The kids were, of course, talking about it the whole Shabbos. They enjoyed it, and they enjoyed you guys. And then Friday morning, so no one had school, so it was like a lot of us were home. And I get a message on the chat that they're doing CPR on the Gadol door. So I got all of the kids into the Svarim room with me, like where we davened. And I said we have to say Tehillim. And we said two kafet lachot Tehillim. And I couldn't get out all the words. It took a while. I don't know. I guess I just had a very bad feeling. And it didn't take long to get word back that Rav Chaim Kanievsky was nifter. I sat down in my chair and just started to cry. Because even though I've never met him, anyone here met him? A lot of people have gotten brought this one. Yeah. And I was listening to a lot of different hespedim about him, from a lot of different, because it's interesting to hear angles, and it's like therapeutic, So Sir Usher Weiss, he mentioned something that I knew, but I never put my finger on it. Why was I so upset? Like, why was I so emotional if I didn't have a connection to him? And it's very difficult to put your finger on it because I'm going to talk about the opposite for a minute. Rav Chaim was raised. Let me start from a slightly different another angle for a minute. I was told Shabbos morning by one of my misfollowing that there was a full page article on Rav Chaim in the New York Times. Yeah. So it was obviously written by a Jew, from Jew, somebody who knew. But it's difficult for the secular world to put a finger on a figure like Rav Chaim Kanievsky. Why? Because you have to find a category for him. Well, was he Rosh Yeshiva? No. Was he a rabbi of a large? Well, technically, maybe no. Liederman Shul. No, not really. What position did he hold? We didn't really have any position. Well, then who was he? Was he the Pope? Well, no, because we don't have one. We don't have that type of organized. So what was he? What did he accomplish? He books. He wrote lots of Svarim. That's true. He was an author. Not so much. So it's very difficult in the secular world because you have to define a person based on his accomplishments. Now we relate to him as the biggest Talmud Chacham on earth, the biggest tzaddik on earth, the most sensitive. I want to tell you stories. I'm going to tell you stories. And should we relate to this person as what we could imagine as a person that this is a little tricky. Because on the one hand, we know we'll never be able to learn like him. He finished the whole Torah every year. Bavli, Yerushalmi, Rambam, Poskim, Midrashim, like everything. Obviously, he didn't cover every single tshuva in the Achronim, you know what I mean? But anything that was the corpus of primary sources, he finished it all every year. And the Gemaras, he didn't just learn through once, he had to learn it 4 times, right? Because you have to learn every Gemara 4 times, or 4 lines of Rashi told at the top of every daf, you're supposed to learn it 4 times before you get started learning, So how many times did he finish us? He was 94. I don't know what age, I think it was at 16, he was already considered an expert in 2 Masechtas or 2 Sdarim, I forgot already. So he was working on this. Anyway, the point is that it's hard to pinpoint what exactly was his accomplishment because he was just a constant Oved Hashem. He was constantly being Oved Hashem. So very few people had anything you could describe as a relationship with him. Do you know what I'm talking about? The people that came through there originally used to get bracha v'hatzlacha. We're talking about some of the brachas he gave, why, but bracha v'hatzlacha, yeah? The last few years, you know what he said? Buha. Because it stands for Beis Vav Hey bracha v'hatzlacha. So what's wrong with just saying bracha? Why do they have to go to buha? The answer is because it takes a few seconds to say bracha v'hatzlacha, and if you multiply that by the hundreds of people that he was seeing every single day, so it adds up. So he just started saying, and he also had a really good sense of humor. You see a lot of times, like he'll say like a comment, you can't even hear what he's saying, but like into his son or whatever, and he's like smiling, So yeah, so that it was about saving time. It was about anyway. So people didn't have a relationship with him. Like nowadays, yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael, for all of us, it was about finding relationships with Rebbeinu, no? Because if you would have gone to yeshiva and he would have said, learn, I'll teach you how to learn Gemara, you wouldn't have gone to that yeshiva. But Rav Chaim wasn't like that. Rav Chaim sat and he learned. Yeah, but what did he do? No, that's what he did. He sat and he learned. But what if they wanted him to be a sandik? He would go anywhere on earth to be in Eretz Yisrael, to be a sandik. Yeah? He was a sandik. Something had 13 brisses on a day sometimes, What was he doing? He was learning in the car. He learning. He sat down, he learned. And he considered his learning that he had to get done because that's a lot of learning. That's daily schedule is grueling if you have to finish the entire Torah every single year. So he called it his chovos. When he married off one of his sons, I guess it'd be the first story that when he married off one of his sons, he apologized to to what they call him a chutin, the groom's father. So I don't know what we call that in English. He apologized. He's marrying off his son.
Yes, he's the groom's father.
So
to the bride's father.
The bride's father.
Right.
The bride's father, he apologized because he said he won't be able to make it to all of the Shabbat brachas because he's a Baal Chov. A Baal Chov means I owe money. I'm the master, I own debts. So, he mentioned, I forgot to his son or whatever, he's like, can I help him out financially? If this is really such a big deal, maybe I can, get him some money. So he said, no, you don't know, that's not what he meant. He considers his daily learning a chov. Here's what he used to call it. That was his debt, that he had to cover this. That's what he owes for the day. So sometimes a visitor would present himself to Rav Chaim, never dreaming that on the previous night, you know how much he slept? An hour. Because he was meeting with people and this happened and that happened, and he had chovos. So he didn't go to sleep until he had covered what he needed to cover. So a person would come there and he would speak, didn't think for a second, he only slept an hour last night. There was schedule as such, he almost never sleeps more than 3. There are nights where he barely manages 1. And it's because of this non-negotiable schedule of chovos, that's what he has to cover. Can you imagine? I got to cover 50 blot of Yerushalmi today, in addition to whatever, and whatever else, that's an incredible amount of learning. Incredible amount of learning. Rav Chaim's learning is often interrupted by visitors, some from abroad, some bearing life and death questions. So being sleep deprived is a normal state for him. But when the doors are closed and there aren't many people around, his debt has been paid. He has all the time in the world to give to those who are close to him. But he wasn't like a schmoozer. He sat and he learned and he learned and he learned. We discussed, because we gave us 7 shiurim on Shabbos with Rav Chaim. So we talked about how he didn't use electricity on Shabbos, right? He had a kerosene lamp. And everybody wanted to know, like, well, what do you do? Like, what do you do when you can't use the fire? Let's say you have a shomer, like it's complicated. What do you do? What do you learn? Like, how do you? So they used to have games. They have games that he would play with. What were the games? So sometimes he would take a sefer off of the shelf and they would say the name of the sefer or whatever. And Rav Chaim would know exactly where the position, which shelf, which sefer was. That was one of their games. Hundreds, thousands of svarim else, I don't know. And the other game was that they had a sefer that goes through all of the phrases, idioms in Shas and in Midrashim or whatever. And they would say what it was. It goes to Aleph Beis, from Aleph to Saf. They would say the thing, and he would say the source. And sometimes he would add on ones that aren't even in the book. Where you find this, in all of Shas. That was the games that they would play when, the lights were basically out because they didn't use the electricity on Shabbos. So you have to sort of get an understanding. So it's unbelievable that how many people were at the Levaya yesterday? What did they say?
1 million, something like that?
Probably less. Okay, maybe less. But they were talking probably around 750,000. That's the number everybody's been talking about. No, chocolate chips up for grabs. So it's an astonishing thing how close people felt to him when there was always, by definition, a distance. You know what I'm saying? No? Yeah. So I don't know how you guys feel. I don't know how much you know about him. Like I don't know but it's an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing. Rav Chaim's usual brachas. I'm going to read what it says in this book. I'm reading from Rav Nachman Seltzer's book, Inside Their Homes, where he talks about meeting all these different gedolim. So I'll stick mostly to what he says over here. So he obviously wrote this years ago, and it's all in the present tense. And obviously, whenever we talk about Rav Chaim, it means so Rav Chaim's usual brachas consist of 2 words, bracha v'hatzlacha, and he became buha, like we said. There are times, however, especially when it comes to matters of shidduchim, where he uses the word bekarov. Yeah, it should be very soon. Yeah, when he utters the word bekarov, it's time to start planning the wedding. It's gonna happen. It's on its way. Of course, by now people know the code words, and so they tried to force him to say certain things because that's what they wanted out of him. You know what I mean? No. Say Bekarov, yeah? Rabbi Bekarov? Why? Because that meant he would be on his way. That's the way it worked. If you would say Bracha Batzlacha, so they mean, you had a pretty good chance that this was happening. But if you would say Bekarov, it meant like somehow he knew that this was happening imminently. And it was. But you couldn't do it. There was no way that you could change what he was going to say. Because Rav Chaim was no one's puppet. Once he gave a bracha, he wouldn't change his choice of phrase. He said, I've seen it from many people. People came in and they're trying to change it, and it didn't work. It didn't work. Listen to this, Mike. One time it happened that there was a fellow that came in and he wanted a bracha for both of his daughter and for his daughter-in-law, because both of them were pregnant. Yeah? So what did he want from Rav Chaim? A bracha that they should have an easy pregnancy, delivery, whatever, yeah? So he wanted a bracha for it. What were the words he was looking for? A leida kala. Yeah? An easy birth. That's what he wanted from Rav Chaim. So he says, when I was translating the visitor's words into Yiddish for Rav Chaim to understand, I made a mistake. And I realized only later, Rav Chaim thought that he had come in for a bracha for children. That he was trying to have a bracha for children. Yeah?
The kids were all 20.
So this is Rav Chaim's response when he thought that they were asking for children, that the father came in, I want my daughter to have children. So he said they should check their mezuzahs. That's what he said. They should check their mezuzahs. They're having trouble having babies, they should check their mezuzahs. Yeah? So the guy was like, okay. They got into the car, they drove away, and they started talking about this encounter, and the fellow was really disturbed. He's like, what happened? And then the translator realized that he made a mistake and that it was the wrong question. So he called up to the Chaim's grandson or whatever, and he said, can you find out what's happened over here? There was a misunderstanding. So please go and tell Rav Chaim what happened. Once you've clarified the situation, ask him whether this man has something to worry about or not. Like, should he check, is there a problem? See, he said that the grandson went back to Rav Chaim and said, Rav Chaim said, listen, so many people ask me questions every day. I can't remember how the question was asked and, what I understood and how I answered it. I don't remember. But we'll talk about that too, don't let me forget, yeah? Rav Chaim only remembered Torah. I will tell you just one little thing before we go on. This really happened? You're gonna say this didn't happen. You can say this is a joke. I'm telling you, this really happened. He would sit every single day. He came home at a certain time, and his wife prepared him lunch. And the same thing by dinner. He wouldn't eat until she sat down to eat with him. Right? He would make a bracha rishona because he was very good at making bracha rishona, because the food was in front of him and he looked at it and he made a bracha. And then after he ate, he would always have to ask the Rebbetzin, what did I just eat? Because he wanted to know the bracha for him. Right? I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means. But that's the way his mind was. He was with his wife. He knew he was with his wife. He wouldn't have missed it. And he was broken after she died. So it wasn't like he didn't have a relation. He was broken. And he didn't know what he ate. You know, they say about Rav Elyashiv. Rav Elyashiv was his father-in-law. They say about Rav Elyashiv that if somebody wanted to know the bracha on schnitzel, you know the schnitzel shaila? Schnitzel is covered in breadcrumbs, but the schnitzel is chicken. So what bracha do you make? Hamoti, mizonos, or shahakal? Okay, so it depends on how thick the crust is. If it's really like a knish or something, but schnitzel's usually not like that. Especially not, I don't know, maybe Eretz Yisrael is more like that. Like, that's the machlokes. Is there more chicken in America? Anyway, point is they went to Rav Elyashiv and they asked him, what's the bracha on schnitzel? So he said, what's schnitzel? Yeah. So his Rebbetzin said, it's what you ate for lunch. So he said, oh, okay. Then the bracha is, you know, whatever. I think he said chocolate, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's chicken with bread, not bread with chicken.
Yeah. So, you know, he knew what he ate and he knew it. He just didn't know what schnitzel was. Rav Chaim didn't know what he ate. Anyway, so the point is he didn't remember things that weren't Torah. He didn't pay attention. It wasn't no Geya. Did I tell you the story how he was released from the army? He went to register for the IDF. And he went for his interview. And so they said to him, where do you live? And he says, I'm in the dorm in yeshiva. So they said, okay, well, what's the address of the yeshiva? He says, I don't know. He's like, well, what street is it on? He said, I don't know. And he wasn't joking. He didn't know. So they said, how do you get there? He's like, I go out of my house, I make a right on the left or whatever. And there's, you know, there's yeshiva. So they said, you know, he's mentally not with it. Yeah. He had to come back again a later time to be realized, whatever it was, I don't know, another second time. And he sat there and he learned. And he went to the counter after hours, they were closing. And they said, sorry, you have to leave. He's like, what, he didn't call my name? So they said, what's your name? He said, Kanievsky. He said, we did call your name 20 times. So they wrote down hard of hearing, you know, not allowed in the army. But it was he wasn't trying to get the Lamaisa. This is how he met his wife. Yeah, the Stipler, his father, sent Rav Chaim to the bus station in Bnei Brak, I guess, to meet the daughter of Rav Elyashiv. Yeah, and he was supposed to pick her up and bring her home. Go to the bus station, meet the girl that you might marry, and bring her home. She got to the bus station. Nothing doing, had to figure out how to get to the Kanievsky home because nobody met her there. She shows up at the Kanievsky home. Where's Chaim? I don't know. Wasn't there. So the Stipler, or he sent somebody, I don't know. He went back to the bus station and he was still sitting there learning. Oh, what does that mean? What does that mean? We don't know what that means. We don't know what that means. But that was how he was. You can watch all the videos of him. Yeah, he's sitting from the Gemara. He's thousands of people. Okay, there are tens of people just in the room crowding around him. It's not no Geya. He didn't see it. He was just laser focused. Unbelievable. Yeah, our generation. Anyway, okay, so this is what happened. So the guy was freaking out because the Rav Chaim had told him to check the mezuzahs. And it was a mistake. There was the wrong question. So he's like, listen, to the grandson said, listen, if that's what my grandfather said, it's kedai to check the mezuzahs. So of course, you know within the next part of the story, right? They went back, they checked the mezuzahs, this one was puzzle, this one had no mezuzah in it. Yeah? There was a ma'aseh by me in Pomona where there was a guy that moved into a house And I don't remember if he had Shaila on the mezuzahs, whatever it was, but his daughter was sweeping the floor and she banged the broom into one of the mezuzahs, knocked it off the wall. It was empty. Yeah. So that was the same thing happened over here. Same thing happened over here. Check the mezuzahs. It was a mistake, but it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. That was a normal thing that happened by Rav Chaim. There was a couple been married for 10 years. They didn't have kids. The doctors gave up hope and they said, physiologically it's not happening. It's not happening. So the father wrote a letter to Rav Chaim with a chiddush. His chiddush was, you find by Yitzchak, remember the very beginning of the parsha, Yitzchak, nochach ishto. They were davening for kids. He was davening opposite his wife for kids. Yaakov Avinu, right? He davened for children. Midrashim say, Rachel said to him, like, why, you got to daven. He's like, you're davening for yourself. You're not davening for me. What's going on? You had kids and I didn't. He was davening. But you don't find Midrashim or anything saying that Avram Avinu davened for Sarah. What's pshat? So he had a chiddush. This guy's chiddush was, well, because Sarah, according to Chazal, couldn't have babies because she didn't have uterus. So if it's physiologically impossible, so maybe you can't daven. So if the doctors say that she can't have kids, so then does that mean that we shouldn't daven, that it's, as they say, farfallen, it's an impossibility that you're not allowed to daven for. Yeah? Okay, now I need to preface his answer. You all know that during COVID, there was a lot of politics. Yeah? And there were people that said, you shouldn't take the vaccine, don't give your kids the vaccine. Everybody knows all of the issues involved. You probably also know that in the beginning of COVID, Rav Chaim said everybody should learn, because that's more dangerous to stop learning. But eventually, when they said people are dying, he said then you have to close the yeshivas and everybody has to learn at home. So Rav Chaim was the one that told everybody to get vaccinated. And Rav Chaim told you to get your kids vaccinated. Okay, this is the same Rav Chaim. Famously, the Vilna Gaon, this is my second preface, the Vilna Gaon.
Not that I agree with his position or anything, but some people say that towards the end, especially like with COVID, he was like already feeling like too old to like give his something or something.
No, not at all. He was lucid until the end. He was weak the last couple of days, they say, but lucid until the end. So they say about the Vilna Gaon that somebody went to the Vilna Gaon saying that the doctor said that this person has, 6 months to live or whatever. And he got agitated. And you have to understand what he said. The Gemara in Bava Kama that talks about, the pasuk says v'rapo yirapeh, that if you damage someone, you have to pay for doctor bills, right? So you see from here, the Torah is giving permission to a doctor to heal. Because how can Hashem say pay doctor bills if you're not allowed to go to the doctor, right? So the Torah is saying, that's the Lashon Chazal already. Mikan nitne reshus l'roife l'rapos. From here, permission is given to the doctor to heal. You with me? Mm-hmm. So the Gaon famously said, the doctors have permission to heal. That's it. They don't have permission to say how long you're going to live. They don't have permission to say that. So similarly, this guy went to Rav Chaim and he said, what do I do about my daughter? They said she can't have kids. Maybe Avram didn't down for Sarah because she couldn't have kids. So his answer was, Ein harufim yodim klum. Doctors don't know anything. Now again, right, understand properly. He didn't mean doctors don't know anything, right? Because he paskins like the doctors. If the doctors say vaccine, he said vaccinate. You with me? Okay. But he's saying that doctors don't have a right to say she's not going to have a baby. A short while later, the man's relative found out, guess what? She was expecting that their son's bris, which is held about 9.5 months after the question was posed to Rav Chaim. The man who had sent Rav Chaim's letter rose to speak, sharing his letter with everybody there. And of course, Rav Chaim's, one-liner. That's a small mice. Listen to this one. There was a person that had heard the story and responded to the author of this book. And he said, we went to Rav Chaim too, because we had 9 children. But then my wife had a lot of complications and the blood test came back that she had blood issues. And if she were to get pregnant again, I don't know what the issue was, it doesn't say, but if she were to get pregnant again, it would be a sakana for her if she was pregnant again. So they were concerned because they didn't want to stop having kids. Do they have to stop having kids? And what she did, so they went to Rav Chaim. So Rav Chaim, I guess, had asked him, how many children do you have? So he said 9. So Rav Chaim looks at Rav Chaim's sense of humor. He says, what, you need a million? Yeah. But then he got very serious and he said, bracha v'atzlacha. So the husband said, amen. He says, but Rebbe, what do I tell my wife? She's a wreck. She wants to have kids. She's very upset. What do I tell my wife? It's dangerous. When you become a woman, you'll know. So this is
How about that the Johan Flower guy, girl, how that?
You saw that? You saw that?
Yeah.
I don't know. I did not.
Ezra can't swim that fast.
So
Ezra can't swim that fast.
so Rav Chaim,
I love it right now.
Rav Chaim answered him, Yiyeh b'seder. Yiyeh b'seder. It'll be okay. Yeah, it'll be okay. My wife found out she was expecting within a week. In the past, of course, she had morning sickness and all these kinds. He said, okay, so she did it. This one was going great. No morning sickness. Like during our 5th month, it became time to deal with the blood complications the doctors warned us about. And when we went to the doctors, we had to get all of our, it's a specialist. I had to go to a new specialist, never been before. So we had to go to the hospital and get all the paperwork from whatever had come before. So they did new blood work on her at the 5 months. And then they brought in all the medical records. So the specialist that they went to, he's looking at the new blood work, he's looking at the paperwork. He says something doesn't make sense. Something's wrong. You're missing paperwork. Obviously, something missing because what's on the paper, everything's fine. And in the blood work, everything that came before said this is going to be a problem. Obviously, there's a mix-up. Something's going on. We go back to the hospital, get the records straight, straighten out whatever. And so they did. That was it. That was it. The doctor couldn't. It doesn't make any sense. He says, but I got it. One morning, a guy that just had a baby was called up to the Torah in the Liederman Shul, which is where Rav Chaim officially was the Rav. And he made a Misha Berach for his newborn daughter. After davening, the glowing father went to Rav Chaim and said, Rebbe, do you remember me? Rav Chaim didn't speak, but he nodded his head this way. Let me just contrast this. Like you should appreciate it. The Chamav photographic memory. My uncle told me that one time he went to, and he didn't frequent Chacham Avadia. I think he spoke to him twice. He went to Chacham Avadia with some sort of issue, Dvar Torah, I don't know, whatever it was, and he talked to him in learning. He said he blew him away. His Bekias, he knew everything. Whatever I said, which was not the sukkah he was involved in, he knew everything. Had to tell, like photographic memory. Blah, 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 blah. He could talk to you about anything and anywhere in all of the Torah. When I came back to him, I don't know, however time later, he picked up the conversation right where we had left off. Yeah.
Mhm.
Do you remember me? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Not.
What? Why was he not made like chief rabbi?
He was gonna know.
There's a story behind that. His father told him that he's not supposed to be like in those positions. He doesn't want those positions, and that's not his role in life in those positions. He's supposed to sit and learn and write Sfarim. By the end of his life, he ended up in those positions because there was nobody else. So he ended up being known as, this is the person you go to for the final word on anything in Judaism. But his father sort of like never dreamed. What?
Who is it from Ashkenaz now?
Yeah, Ashkenaz in the yeshiva world.
No, I'm saying who is it now?
Nobody really knows.
Chief.
There's just like nobody that
Who is it
is
now?
on.
Yeah.
I heard it's this other 94-year-old rabbi. I don't know.
There's nobody. The Rosh Yeshiva Panovich, Rav Edelstein.
I wasn't seeing, she went to my yeshiva. I learned with him daily.
There's nobody on this madrega.
For a couple of days.
Anyway, so he said, I don't remember you, yeah? So the fellow told him the story. He said, my wife and I had been married for 5 years.
How was anyone supposed to read that?
My wife and I were married for 5 years, couldn't have kids. We decided on a certain course of treatment, but that meant we'd have to go to the States, to the United States of America, you heard of it? For this drawn out procedure. And because it was, whatever, it's a whole thing, we wanted a bracha, yeah? Listen to this, yeah? What do you expect him to say? Bracha and miraculously successful. You know what he said? He said, I can't give you bracha. Why? Because my father was against that procedure. So you said, no offense, Rabbi, I didn't come for your advice. This is a decision we made. I just want your blessing. He says, I can't give you a bracha for something that my father said is asur. So he said, I tell you what though, if you stay here, and you don't do the procedure, I will give you a bracha for us.
Wait, what was the part that was not allowed?
I don't know the
Leaving
particular,
Israel?
I don't know what treatment it was.
Oh, was it
I could guess, but I don't want to. There is a particular fertility treatment and he wouldn't give his bracha.
Yeah.
But he said, what should I tell my wife? She's a broken person. Rebbe, you said the following words. If you don't fly to the States to do the procedure, then Hashem Yazor, Hashem will help. Year later, here's the baby girl. Allow me to describe, you ready for this? You ready? You gotta hear this. You gotta hear this. This is the only place, everybody's heard stories, but this is the only place I've read a person that was standing in the room watching a cycle of people come through. And because the room is only like a few feet, he got to hear what Rav Chaim said to a number of people at the same time. You with me? Okay, so you don't want to be on your phone right now. Allow me to describe a normal everyday scene in Rav Chaim's home. There are 30 people waiting in the room outside. I'm standing beside Rav Chaim watching his every move. In general, when it comes to speaking with Rav Chaim, there isn't much privacy. People have to know that it's very likely they're going to be other people that are going to hear whatever's going on. So he says, if you want to do it privately, write a letter, like he gives advice in the book. It's a great book. Anyway, so he says, the first one enters the room. Rebbe, I've been married for 7 years. We haven't had any kids. So what does he say? You should do shiluach haken. You know what shiluach haken is? When you shoo away the mother bird that laid eggs.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I did this once, yeah? I don't know if I was officially yotze. What? Shiluach, to send away. Haken, the nest. The shoo away the nest. It really means the mother bird. Shiluach haken. My deck, underneath the deck are beams. So birds sometimes make nests under the beams. Now, you're not really yotze shiluach haken that way because the nest has to be made in a place that's hefker. So Rav Chaim has to say, brother. So it's possible that if you're mafkir it after it's there, maybe it still counts as a makom hefker, or maybe not because it wasn't made when it was hefker. Like a tree or going in the fire, exactly. So I was mafkir the makom after it was already laid. Okay, but maybe I'm yotze. So I have a video of it. You want to see? So we shoot it. It was a robin, which is a suffix. If it's a kosher bird, nobody eats robins, whatever. But the one thing that's true is that the scientists know that the bird that's there during the day is the tati. And the mom is only there at night. So you have to do shiluach haken at night if it's a robin. Okay, so we did it at night and we picked up the eggs. Anyway, so.
So you saw the mother bird over there and you're like, shoo.
Yeah. I waited, I tried to do it quietly. So I was able to shoo her away. Because if you scare her before you have a chance, you miss your chance.
Yeah.
You have to go quietly and then shoo away the bird.
Well, you have to say like, shoo.
I don't even have to say
You
shoo.
walk next door.
I was
Maybe you walk, right? Whatever, make noises and you scare her away. Anyway, it was very interesting mitzvah. So that's what he said. Yeah, you should do shiluach haken. Now the Chazal said shiluach haken is long life. Okay.
So you should wait for the bird to come back so you can chew it instead of just taking the eggs?
Yes.
And you have to eat the eggs?
No. You don't have. We picked up the eggs and we put them straight back.
Like God just.
Oh, you don't break the eggs?
Tuesdays with that
What would happen if you just take the eggs?
You can do whatever you want. You don't have to.
do it.
Yeah, the mitzvah is just to take.
What was that?
Okay, wait. So that's what he told the first one, right? That's what the first one. The man leaves. The next 5 people come in asking random questions. They get their answers and they leave. Listen to this. Number 7 enters the room. It's the same heartbreaking issue that supplicant number 1 spoke of. Him and his wife have been married for years. They haven't had children. So what's he going to say? It's the shiluach haken day, right? No. He says, do you do the mitzvah havdalah with wine? So he says, not always. Sometimes we use grape juice. Only wine from now on. Okay? It's only going to be wine, from then on for this guy. 10 more people come, they get brachas, advice, they leave. 11th person, children again. Will Rav Chaim say shiluach haken? Wine for Havdalah? No. Are your beds facing north-south or east-west? So he says, no, you should put your beds, like this. Among the many people who came to see him that night, 5 came for help with children. To each, Rav Chaim gave a different answer, different advice. How did he know? This one Shiloh Haken, this one Havdalah, no one knows. When the fifth man told Rav Chaim how they were still childless and needed a bracha, Rav Chaim looked in the eye and said, you could daven. You could daven. I can daven? You're allowed to daven. The man understood Rav Chaim was refusing to give him a bracha or any advice, and the man started to cry. Why doesn't the Rav want to give me a bracha? Rav Chaim's warm gaze met the tear-filled eyes of his supplicant. The Chavetz Chaim used to say that sometimes it's better not to have children. You don't know who their friends will be. You don't know if they'll be good children. Sometimes a person's children aren't well. You're allowed to daven. 5 different people, 5 different examples in the same scenario. One a bracha, one word of advice, to one not even a bracha. How does he know? So we had our Sunday shmooze with Rav Chaim yesterday, and Rav Chaim said that there's no doubt that Rav Chaim had Ruach HaKodesh. No doubt he had Ruach HaKodesh. Rav Chaim himself said that a tzaddik's brachas are fulfilled based on how much emunas chachamim the person getting the bracha has. So you have to have a lot of emunas chachamim if you go to a tzaddik, and you have to accept what he says. And if you're not willing to accept what he says, it's better not to go. I have a ma'aseh. I know somebody.
But I still want to know what he says,
Oh, so listen to this. I know someone that learned in Bnei Brak. He was actually a ger, and he went to Bnei Brak, and he was learning in Panovich, Shach, and the Stipler. He converted, and he was learning there, and he was getting older, and he wanted to know, what he should do, considering all his options. Where should he get married? Who should he marry? Should he go back to the United States? He's American, so he went to the Stipler, Chaim's father, and he asked somebody, and the Stipler told him, stay in Eretz Yisrael and learn in Kollel. Because he didn't listen. Came back to the States, he got married, no job, got divorced. The marriage didn't work. Got married a second time. This time he had 3 children. The oldest, I think this is the boy, is the one that's very disabled. And then 2 girls that's Baruch Hashem healthy. And then his wife, it didn't go well. He lost his job in computers. And she couldn't handle. She threw him out of the house, lost custody of the kids. I kid you not. When I met him, he was living in a toy store, someone else's toy store. He had no job, he had no family, he had nowhere to live. To make a very long story short, he's back in Eretz Yisrael, and he's a janitor. And he tells me repeatedly, I wish I had listened to this night bar. A Bachar in his 30s asked Rav Chaim for a bracha for a shidduch. Rav Chaim took a good look at him and said, if you start to grow a beard, you will find your kala very soon. It's impossible for me to grow a beard. Give me something else to do. Nope, you have to grow a beard. Your kala is waiting for you to grow a beard. If you grow a beard, you'll find her. It's impossible for me to do that. Nobody in my family has a beard. Anything but that. Give me anything else, Rebbe, and I'll take it on. I can't do that. Rav Chaim looked him in the eye and said with uncharacteristic firmness, if you don't grow a beard, you will remain single until 120. Oh my gosh. Seriously? Everyone's standing around. It was in shock. Rav Chaim doesn't talk like that. What in the world? He repeated a second time that Bachar started to cry. He literally broke down in tears. Rav Chaim's grandson approached to try and intervene. Saba, Bachar's crying. Asma, so what? This is what he needs to hear. This is the truth. Lo kara klum, he can cry. And he said, if he doesn't grow a beard, he's not going to get married until 120. The kid left upset at the person who brought him and didn't want to listen. What did you get me into? He yelled at the man who accompanied him. Take me to a different gadol. No gadol's going to tell you you don't have to grow a beard once Rav Chaim said that you should. You're talking about someone who's known worldwide as a Baal Ruach HaKodesh. You think anybody's going to challenge what he says? Anyway. As a postscript, one of the editors working on this book mentioned this story about growing a beard to a friend of hers. Her friend started to laugh It turns out that her son, who was in his early 20s, had gone to Rav Chaim before leaving Eretz Yisrael and starting to go into Shidduchim, and Rav Chaim gave him the same eitzah, grow a beard. Her son was reluctant to do so. He claimed that the type of girl he was looking for didn't want to go out with a bearded guy. Yeah? 1 year passed, 2 years passed, 4 years passed, wasn't getting married. The boy was almost 26. And though he was a top bacher from a great family and got many suggestions, nothing worked out. Finally went to Rabbi Matisyahu Solomon for a bracha, and he mentioned in the conversation that Rav Chaim told him to grow a beard. So Rabbi Matisyahu Solomon says to him, Rav Chaim is a very holy man. So he grew a beard, and guess what? The next girl, the second girl, this is a true story. The second girl he went out with after that, they got married. Oy. So he says that he was involved with a couple, and the wife was really struggling with the marriage.
Anybody want a muffin going on?
Yeah, there's also tons of stuff over here. Anyway, she was struggling with the marriage, and she wasn't sure if she should get involved with divorcing the guy or not, or whatever. So, what her bottom line is, she said, maybe I should go to Rav Chaim. So he said to her, it's a great idea, but just you have to commit yourself ahead of time. You have to do whatever he says. Like if he says you have to get divorced, you gotta be ready to do that. So she says, I can't. She says, then don't go. So she didn't go. Isn't that a beautiful story? Rav Chaim. On another occasion, I took a prominent artist to visit Rav Chaim for a bracha for Parnasa. Being a good artist doesn't mean you're gonna make a lot of money, right? Yeah, even if you're famous, whatever. So Rav Chaim listened, and he seemed excited when I said that he was an artist. So you know what he said? He should draw a picture of the Beis Hamikdash. As I told him, use your talent. You should draw a picture of the Beis Hamikdash. Although this wasn't the type of subject the artist normally painted, you'd think, okay, no, so I'll paint a picture. What's the big deal, right? No, he refused. He wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do it. The artist did not draw the picture. I bumped into him a half a year later. I said, did you draw the picture of the Beis Hamikdash? No, I didn't do it yet. I met him, no. Every time I went, no. The man occasionally calls me and wants to go back for another bracha. It's beyond my understanding. The guy's still poor. He doesn't make a great parnasa. He didn't follow the advice and wants to go for again for round two. That's the way it goes. Yeah.
You made the picture then or no?
On short sleeves.
I heard the following story from one of Rav Chaim's grandsons. Someone told me that the family of a soldier who had been very badly wounded came to my grandfather for a bracha. Rav Chaim gave the soldier a bracha and he recovered against all odds. After the soldier was released from the hospital, he arrived along with his family at Rav Chaim's home for a karas hatov. Upon seeing the recovered soldier, Rav Chaim recited the bracha of Baruch Hatov V'Hametiv. I mean a bracha, Hatov V'Hametiv. Wow. I wanted to verify the story the grandson told me. I went to my grandfather and said, is that true? So he remembered the story. He said, it's true. When they came to see me the first time, Rav Chaim said, they were desperate. The doctors had given up all hope for their son's life and recommending they take him off of life support. We're sorry, your son is already in the next world, they said. There's no reason to keep him attached to machines. I told the parents not to listen to the doctors. The son would have a complete recovery and that he would be bari v'shalom, healthy and whole. Seeing such an obvious miracle certainly necessitated the recital of Hatov V'Hametiv. Another time, a non-religious Israeli came to ask Rav Chaim for a bracha. Like many traditional, but not fully practicing Jews, the man knew enough to put a yarmulke on when he come to see the Gadol Hador. One of my mispalim said that he went to Rav Chaim, I don't know, it was the last time he went, whatever, so he was in his polo shirt because he was on his way to the airport. It's very convenient on your way to the airport, Ben Gurion, Tel Aviv. Yeah, it's very convenient to stop by Bnei Brak. It's right next to Tel Aviv. Yeah, so he says, I'll stop by Rav Chaim on my way to the airport. So he was in his polo shirt for the plane, to be comfortable. So he got in. So the guy with the grandson, whoever it was, says to him, what size are you? So it's like, there's Rav Chaim swag? And he came out with a button-down white shirt, and he put it on him. Anyway, this guy put on a yarmulke at least. And so Rav Chaim said to him, are you Shomer Shabbos? Shomer Shabbat? So the guy lied. Yeah? He says, yes, I am. Before he left, the man asked Rav Chaim for a bracha a second time. So you know what Rav Chaim said to him? When you begin keeping Shabbos, the bracha will be chal.
The bracha will what?
Will be chal, will apply, will be actualized. Listen to this. A certain Bnei Brak Bay found itself facing a severe problem. Many of its employees were suffering from an uncanny spate of foot-related illnesses, broken legs, among other things. It's been going on for a while, and as a last resort, they sent a spokesman to go to Rav Chaim. So he said, "Is your bank open on Chol Hamoed? Is your bank open on Chol Hamoed?" So he said, "Yes." He said, "That's the reason." How does Rebbe know this? He says, "Yerushalmi." The Gemara makes a hekesh, right? The two words that are connected with the word regel. Regel. Comparing the word regel, that means yantif, right? Charles regalim to regel, which means a foot, right? You go on your reglaim, your regel, yeah? If so many people are suffering from medical issues having to do with their regel, it's because of the regel. You're open on Chol Hamoed? This is a somewhat typical response for Rav Chaim. In many instances, his answers to people can be sourced in a Gemara, Halacha, or Drush. His encyclopedic grasp of the entire Torah leaves one astounded and amazed. Another individual came to Rav Chaim complaining of a cough. So, he told him you have to drink milk directly from a goat. Everyone looked at Rav Chaim. What? He says it's a Mefurish Gemara. He quotes the Gemara. This has happened. And he told him to drink from the goat's milk. This is a very cute story. You ready for this? You have to pay attention. Yeah, it's very short. Rav Chaim, it was Purim, and there was a boy going through the street, and he was in Bnei Brak, and he was dressed up as a fish. Close. He was dressed up as a fish. He was wearing a fish costume, right? So Rav Chaim, I guess, was walking the street at the same time when everybody noticed him, and he said, "What are you dressed up as?" So the kid said, "Doug. Doug. I'm a fish." So he said to him, "You're not a fish. You're Yonah." Yonah was swallowed by the fish. You're inside the fish. You're Yonah. Now, the reason that this is so on target is because this is, I want to tell you more, but Rav Chaim, like I was saying, Rav Chaim saw Torah. That's all he saw. So when he sees boy and fish, he understood the kid was dressed up as he got it, But he wanted the kid to know that you're Yonah. And that was what he saw. You with me? That's how he saw the world. The whole world is Torah. So if you see and you understand and you know that that's all of this is all Torah, so he saw what the person's problem was. Why, through his Ruach HaKodesh. This is a dynamic. Torah is a dynamic. You do this, and then there's this, and there's this, and there's this. Oh, it's like a matrix, Listen to this. Listen to this. At times, Rav Chaim feels pressure due to the amount of learning he still needs to accomplish, yeah? But a yeshiva bachar will enter his home. Rav Chaim drops everything and gives him his full attention. Patient, calm. You could think that he has nothing on his mind, I witnessed Bachram sitting with him and asking question after question. I know Rav Chaim is waiting for everyone to leave so he can get back to finishing his daily quota. Yet even after all the questions, Rav Chaim turns to him and says, "Do you want fries with that?" No. Is there anything else you want to ask? On the one hand, he's juggling unlimited responsibilities. On the other hand, he's capable of granting a yeshiva bachar unlimited time to speak to him and learning. As soon as people leave, Rav Chaim turns back to his Gemara and finishes learning his 50 blot, whatever it is, and he won't go to sleep until it's done. It's something to see. An elderly man, he doesn't stop, and he knows so much, he's constantly learning it again and again. Rav Chaim is not impressed with anything other than Torah. This is important to realize because, you could be very sarcastic and what's the right word? People get very jaded and, money talks, One day, a very rich man came to see him for a bracha. This particular person had a reputation for philanthropy and for supporting many yeshivas, and he was treated with kid gloves and copious respect from all across his path. When he entered Rav Chaim's study, the people who brought him were hoping that Rav Chaim would give him, honor, because that's, they had brought him to Rav Chaim. Oh, Rav Chaim, this is so-and-so, he's a billionaire from whatever. Oh, and Rav Chaim would be like, right? That's what they were expecting. Rav Chaim, however, does things his own way. After being introduced to the wealthy man, Rav Chaim looked in the eye and said, "Tell me, do you learn Torah yourself? After all, that's really the main purpose of our lives." Can you imagine? This guy supports like yeshiva and yeshiva and yeshiva, and he says to him, "So like, what are you learning? That's what we're here for." The man hemmed and hawed, and Rav Chaim understood that he himself wasn't really learning much at all. You have to find time to learn. This is the last thing the people who had brought him were expecting to hear. Rav Chaim had given this wealthy man musar instead of honor and taking him to task for ignoring his own obligations. The rich man's handlers were extremely embarrassed. At the end of his visit to Eretz Yisrael, however, the wealthy man told those who had accompanied him, of all the visits, he had most enjoyed his encounter with Rav Chaim, who had seen fit to hit him with the truth, with no regard to the politics of the situation. A postscript. In the end, those few minutes with Rav Chaim paid off. The wealthy man did, in fact, start and found time to learn. This is a really cute story. So this is amazing. As a young man in yeshiva, Rav Chaim shared a room in the dorm with a Rav Moshe Soloveitchik from Switzerland, from the Soloveitchik family. At the time, the yeshiva was suffering from an invasion of
Chinese people.
mice. Hear this thing?
I said moths.
Moths? Mice. So the yeshiva made a rule. They gave everybody these like mouse traps. They would catch the mouse in this little like cage, whatever, with the cheese and the peanut butter, whatever, they get caught in a little trap. And then the rule was you had to then kill the mouse. You had to drown the mouse.
Really?
Yeah, because otherwise, I remember here, I used to learn in the front corner over here. And I remember one day we were sitting and learning, and comes along the yeshiva guy that apparently his job back then was to catch the mice. And he makes one of these little boxes, the paper with like glue inside. Yeah, the sticky stuff. You're supposed to be made into a box, and he puts it on the floor. So we were being friendly to him, whatever, So he says, if the mouse gets caught in that, here's what you do. You take another sticky trap, you put it on top of the mouse, and you step on it. I told you this, because if you leave it there, it'll urinate until it gets rid off the glue, and you'll never catch that mouse again. He'll learn his lesson, and then he'll never catch him again. Okay. Anyway, so neither Rav Chaim or Rav Moshe were able of killing anything. Not for sure, not a mouse or anything else. So they got it in the trap and they left it there because they didn't know what to do. So Rav Chaim suddenly chapped that he has a pet mouse. So he's like, maybe I have to feed it. Sar Bali Chaim. So he went to the Chazon Ish, his uncle, the Chazon Ish, and he said, "Do I have to feed the mouse?" The Chazon Ish said, "No, you're trying to get rid of the mice. You don't have to feed the mouse." So so they left the mouse there, and then a couple of days later, the mouse had lost enough weight that it just like went straight out from in between the bars of the mouse trap, and the mouse escaped. So Rav Chaim reacted to the bizarre incident by quoting a Medrash Koheles. A fox found a vineyard that was all fenced in, with all entrance denied him. Unwilling to concede defeat, the fox circled the vineyard repeatedly until he managed to discover a hole, which could serve as a possible entranceway. The problem is, the fox wasn't skinny enough to fit through. Fox gave the matter some thought and eventually decided to abstain from all food for a day or two. It wasn't long before he was able to fit through the hole. It's a medrash. What?
But he couldn't get out.
So then he ate too much and he couldn't get out. Yeah, that's the end of the medrash. This is exactly what happened here, concluded Rav Chaim. Classic Rav Chaim. Finding what happened in life and finding what life. And this is where it says it in the Torah. Yeah, that's where you see it. Rav Chaim is constantly being invited to different events. In one particular event, Rav Chaim surprised those in the know by remaining much longer than he normally does. Saba, his grandson, asked him, why did you stay so long? There were a lot of speakers, Rav Chaim replied. I was afraid that if I left in the middle, no matter where or when, someone would be offended. And perhaps thinking I'd stayed until that point out of respect for the speaker before him, and that he wasn't worthy enough for me to stay. In the end, I just couldn't leave for fear I'd hurt somebody's feelings. But if you're so pressured for a time, what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if someone's feelings are hurt because of me, none of that matters. I want you to hear what I just said. I don't know if you know what it's like to be under pressure. Yeah? Imagine,
Scuba diving.
right, that's one form of pressure. Imagine that you have a final coming up, you have a paper you need to get done, right? How do you normally respond to somebody that comes to bother you?
Go away.
Rather harshly, yeah? Imagine that pressure. Imagine that pressure on a daily basis. You've got to get this done, yeah? You've got to cover your 50 block of Yerushalmi today, And then none of that matters because what's more important is hurting somebody else's feelings. We don't, we often think of, the big tzaddikim are like that, but the Litvish Rosh Yeshiva that are just about, they don't have these sensitivities. No, it's not like that. I'm the one who tells my grandfather when it's time for him to go downstairs for davening. The grandson said, one day I made a mistake in time. I told him to go down for mincha, and I realized that I was off by 10 minutes. You have to understand something. My grandfather is capable of learning an astounding amount of Torah in 10 minutes. This is not a negligible thing. When I realized my mistake, I immediately began to apologize. But my grandfather cut me off with a wave of his hand. It's not so bad, he comforted me. A few more Yidden will be able to receive a bracha. So somebody had asked him, how do you manage to give these eitzes and to be with people so much when there's so much, responsibility, so much to do, so much learning to cover, whatever. And he didn't even understand the question. He's like, that's chesed. That's what the Torah is for. The Torah is for chesed. So there has to be this incredible balance between the Torah that we learn and how it's translated into chesed. Now, I wanna point out something else. Who here has heard the term das Torah? Have you heard this term das Torah? No? Yes? No? Does anybody have a definition for it?
Knowledge of Torah.
Yeah, the translation comes to knowledge of Torah, but that's what people mean when they use it, right? You know what people use it to mean? I'm going to the Rav, I'm gonna get a psak halacha because I need das Torah. I need what the Torah says about this. Yeah? Das Torah. Now, das Torah, what it really means is that this is an area that you can't look it up in Shulchan Aruch. Because if you can look it up in Shulchan Aruch, you don't need to go ask the das Torah. You know what I mean? What does it say? What's the din? You may not know the din. You may need to ask him for the din. That's not das Torah. That's what it says in Shulchan Aruch. Yeah? Sometimes you need a psak. A psak is also not exactly das Torah, because a psak means that there's a posek. He's a judge. He's an adjudicator. That's what he got smicha for, And his job is to figure out how to categorize this and what's the answer. You know what das Torah is? Das Torah means there's a certain area of life where there is no clear-cut answer. So you need to know what the Torah approach is. Are you with me? You need das Torah. Well, what does it mean, das Torah? You need hashkafas Torah. What's das Torah? Okay, you ready? Please listen. You ready? The only person who can give you the accurate hashkafas Torah about something that is not clear-cut is a person that has das Torah. Das Torah is a reference, is describing the brain of the person that's telling you what Torah says. He has das Torah. What does that mean? That means that he is able to go through all the information that he knows and tell you what to do. This is what the Torah says about your situation. Yeah? This is what the Torah says. But how do you know that? And he'll never be able to tell you, well, because it's a Gemara. I don't know, maybe Rav Chaim would. But it's not because it's a clear-cut question that's a Shaila V'tshuva. Are you with me? Mm-hmm. So what gives him the right to say that? Like, what makes that das Torah? So this is what Rav Chaim says. Yeah? This is what he says. Das Torah means that you can be guaranteed that this is the Torah approach to this situation. Now, how will you ever be guaranteed that? You're talking to a person. A person has biases. A person has experiences. A person has a lot of things that go into his hopper before he produces what he's telling you to do. How do you know that's Das Torah? Maybe it's Das Hogwarts. You know what I'm talking about? Harry Potter.
No,
Yeah. How do you know it's not coming from somewhere else? So the answer is you don't. If you're talking to a person that's read all kinds of secular things and has all kinds of these other things, you don't. You don't. But if you're talking to a person that the only thing that ever went into his brain was Torah, so he has Das Torah. It's fed, nourished, all the nutrients, everything there is Torah. Remember how I told you Rav Chaim remembers nothing other than Torah? He doesn't even know what he just ate. He doesn't know the name of the streets. He doesn't know any of this stuff because all he had was Das Torah. Yeah.
I disagree on that.
What do you mean?
Obviously, he knows the street name he lives on.
No, he didn't. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, if he's a smart person, he probably knows a lot
No.
more stuff.
He didn't know the food he ate. He knew what it was when it was in front of him. And after he finished it, he didn't remember what he had eaten because he didn't think about it. Wasn't no gay, it wasn't relevant.
You didn't know the street or the.
No, that's how he got out of the army. You missed that story. Go back to the recording. You'll listen to the story.
I have Chaim, so when I was in Yeshiva, a friend of mine went to get a friend of mine, like longish hair, not honestly not that long, but longish hair.
Yeah.
He's always shocked.
Did he cut his hair?
No.
No.
You gotta listen to the loud Italian friend there.
Yeah.
What he said?
Are you a guy or a girl?
Who to you?
No, a friend of mine. By the way, it wasn't even such long hair. It was like, I don't know. Yeah, it was like the classic Sparty, like short on the sides, like long, with the back over the top. Or like, it wasn't that long. I don't know. That was the funniest part.
He's gonna be shot. When's the bride? Oh, Rabbi.
Yeah, hold on a second. So that's just it's nothing, it's nothing, but it's like a small glimpse of like, those are stories. The stories give us a little bit of a sense about who this person was, learning, how he became this incredible gadol. And the question we have to ask ourselves is how significant of a loss is it? Yeah. Because I don't think you can appreciate it, but if you're a Rav, you get shilas, you have to be able to answer shilas. So you have your Rebbeim, you have your poskim, Rav Chaim was the Supreme Court of Torah, like what he said, that was it, that you had confidence that was the Das Torah of like any situation. We don't have anybody like that anymore right now. And what happened? What about all his Torah? What does the world stand on? Torah Avodah Gemilus Chataden. Do you know how much Torah we're now missing? Imagine that you have Wi-Fi, and there's a certain strength of the signal, and sometimes the signal is really weak, and then everything slows down. Yeah, that's how it works. We don't have a Torah. It's a real big deal. So personally, we know that on the one hand, this is actually an interesting point, that Chazal tell us that the death of a tzaddik is like the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. But did you know, Chazal also say something that's like a contradiction. They say that the Misa of a tzaddik atones. You've heard this before? Miriam, when she died, is juxtaposed with Paraduma. This week's Parsha. You can say this word on Shabbos. She's juxtaposed with Paraduma. Yeah? Why? Because just like the Paraduma is called a Chatas, it atones, so too the death of Tzaddikim atones. I thought it was like destruction of Beis HaMikdash. Well, because the destruction of Beis HaMikdash also atone. Because the Kadosh Baruch Hu originally was going to destroy Klal Yisrael. But instead of destroying Klal Yisrael, he destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. He took out his wrath, so to speak, on Eitzim V'Amanim, yeah? So that means that, Mirz Hashem, we don't know what was going on with Russia. We don't know what was going on with World War III. We have no idea. We know the Vilna Gaon said World War III is going to be 12 minutes. Yeah, way before there were nuclear hypersonic missiles, none of this stuff, yeah? Nobody knew what he was talking about. How could it be? So I have confidence now. I have confidence now that there's going to be a time period of kapara for Klal Yisrael. The loss of Rav Chaim is going to be that we have a certain time period of kapara, but it ends. And we're given the time period of kapara to figure out how we're going to change by the time it's over. What's Klal Yisrael going to do differently? I would like to make a small suggestion. I think, and they say that when a person dies, anybody, that their midos, that their hanhagos are become hefker. You heard this word? That like if you have a person and they were known to be this, like that midah is available. You can grab it. You can grab that midah. That's what they say. Rav Chaim obviously had a lot of midos, but primary on his list was what they call his hasmada. You know what that means? Timidus, the constancy. He was always learning. Oh, and he was also talking to people. But the only thing he was doing was talking to people, was learning. It was all in the category Yer Yonah. It was all Torah. The whole world was Torah. I think, and again, we'll never be on the Madrega. Never. Maybe. I don't believe it. We set aside time to learn, I think that that's the midah that we should try to work on. We should try to work on our midah of hasmada. Hasmada has 2 points to it. How much we're involved in learning and the intensity of that learning. I think these are 2 things that we should think about. How much are we learning and how intense is our learning? They say Rav Chaim spoke on a phone twice. A phone.
In his whole life?
Twice.
Who's that?
His sons, man. As far as they know, he spoke on a phone twice. Once was because somebody called up. They said they thought that he was upset at somebody, needed to make sure they knew he wasn't upset at them, so he had to make a phone call. And the other time was when his son had to go for treatment for something in America or something like that. So he called him to wish him refuah shleima. He lived a life that we can't even imagine. He was in a room and he learned, and he went to be sandik and he came back and he learned. He was in that room, he just learned and he learned. And people came to him and he learned and he learned and he learned. And then he would show up at an event because they asked him to be there. He didn't give shiurim. Wasn't a public speaker. He learned and 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 he learned. So we should keep this in mind. We should keep this in mind when we learn, what it means focus, what it means intensity. And we should look for ways to be a little bit more involved in our learning, a little bit less involved in shtus. Anyway,
What is it called?
This book is called Inside Their Homes, Rabbi Nachman Seltzer.
Is it possible maybe on Thursday I could borrow it for the weekend and bring it back?
I guess.
If you allow it.
Why don't you do shears?
So his father, the stipler, told him that he doesn't want him ever holding a position.
Don't you want to share your Torah?
So he did. He said that you're supposed to be writing Sfarim.
No.
That the way you'll publicize your Torah is by writing Sfarim. I want you to write Sfarim. And he did. In fact, this year he should have published a sefer because the way his learning cycle went was that every year there was a leap year, there was an extra month. So he would write a sefer. So, but it's unbelievable. He became such an incredible leader. Chazon Ish was also like that a lot. He wasn't really an official position. Rav Chaim also, he wasn't like the Rosh Yeshiva. He was like Rav Chaim. Some of our greatest gedolim didn't have like official positions. They shagged and they became leaders. There's like a New York Times article where they interviewed Rav Moshe Feinstein and asked him how he became a gadol. I have it somewhere. I have a copy of it. He's like, well, somebody asked me some questions. They liked the way I answered them. So more people asked me questions, and more people, and then, yeah.